How's it going, everyone? Nick from Comic Culture here. It's time for Nick at Night, my weekly comic book review show. Just got done reading all my books. Let's go through each and every one of them right now. So we're going to start in the big two as we always do. First, we're going to throw up our grading scale. How this works is every time I go over a book, I'm going to put the cover of that book on the grading scale so you can see how they stack up against each other. So let's jump into DC first. I only got one DC book this week, kind of a light week for DC in general, obviously for me. We have Swamp Thing Green Hell issue number 2 from Jeff Lemire, and we have Doug Mahnke on here as well, a long anticipated issue number 2, because issue number 1, man, I feel like it came out back in the fall, maybe the late summer. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but it feels like it's been forever since we had this issue, and I'm so glad we got issue number 2 finally on the shelves. And so just for a little recap of what's going on since it's been so long, we basically have a far in the distant future storyline here where Swamp Thing is kind of retired. He's pretty much made some kind of an alliance with the Green. He doesn't need to be the avatar of the Green anymore. He's still in his form, and he's basically kind of like in this Matrix state right now within this like dreamland with his family. So he's kind of chilling and being retired right now. Unfortunately, up on the Earth and on the surface level, we have all these other parliaments getting together and basically taking out humanity because humanity's a piece of shit and they're trying to get rid of them. They're polluting the Earth. Everything's going to hell right now. So we have, I believe it's the Rot, the Decay, and the Green, if I'm not mistaken, those 3 parliaments right now, teaming up to kind of wipe out the rest of humanity. So humanity's rebelling against them. They elicit the help of John Constantine, who then summons Swamp Thing out of early retirement. Now Swamp Thing has to team up with the humans to take on the Green, the Rot, and the Decay, if I'm not mistaken. So again, Swamp Thing is just chilling right now, kind of in his own little paradise, and he gets summoned back up by Constantine. I will say, this book is really cool. There's a lot of interesting concepts in here when it relates to like the different parliaments. They all talk to each other. They're all kind of advanced and sick of humanity's crap and the way they've been treating the world in general. And so, you know, their objective is just to take them out. And then we have Constantine in here, very much in the Constantine voice. So if you're a fan of that character, I think you're going to like him inside of this book. He's really just a son of a bitch, and he's just awesome, you know? So he's going around pulling Swamp Thing out of retirement. He's not sorry at all. He's got his little quips. He's got his sense of humor. He's got that vibe that Constantine always has. So I love that a lot. I will say, if you are a fan of like some kind of grotesque artwork, this has it in here. It's very reminiscent of the Ram V, Spicer, and Perkins Swamp Thing run as far as like the creativity goes with some of that, but the art style is completely different. We have a more classic looking Swamp Thing inside of this run. So if you've been missing that look, that Swamp Thing look, I think you're going to get it back inside of Green Hell. So really cool book, Black Label issue. Took forever between issue number 1 and number 2, but I think number 3 is on schedule for next month. Check it out. It's really cool. All right, that was it for DC. We're going to jump into some Marvel books next with Invincible Iron Man. We have issue number 3 here, and I'm getting these connecting covers because I think it's going to be pretty cool. Although I cannot find issue number 1 now, so I might have gotten rid of that one on accident, so that's going to kind of throw off my whole game plan. We got Gary Dugan on here, and he's doing his best to tell an interesting Iron Man story here. You know, we learned in the first couple of issues that Tony Stark is essentially homeless right now. He's lost almost all of his money. He basically has a couple of suits laying around. He's kind of dipping back into alcohol a little bit. He got poisoned recently, and all these other villains are attacking him now, saying they kind of ruined his life recently. So he is led to believe that somebody is impersonating him. So he's on the case now trying to figure out who that actually might be. So we get some doppelganger action inside of here. The art's not bad. I would say it's just kind of like run-of-the-mill, kind of average right now. Nothing's really blowing me away from that perspective. And the storytelling is okay as well. You know, if you're just interested to know what Tony Stark is up to nowadays, you know, in continuity, then, you know, this might be a decent read to kind of get caught up on, but I wouldn't say the story is anything to write home about. So the redeeming factor, I think, in here is the person that's kind of behind the scenes pulling all the strings is a character I was really interested in another run, another Marvel run, that I think they pretty much abandoned. And he had an interesting backstory and an interesting part to play in that other Marvel run. So I'm glad that he's back inside of here, and I want to see how that character is going to be fleshed out going forward. So is this an essential read? Absolutely not. If you're just a big Tony Stark fan and you want to know what's going on with Iron Man, then you can check it out, but it might be a trade read. All right, these next 2 books I'm going to go over very briefly because they're kind of all over the place and I'm not quite paying attention to everything going on, but we have X-Men number 19 and we also have Captain Marvel number 46. Now, the reason I put these 2 books together is essentially because we are all attacking the Brood right now. So we have part 4 of Revenge of the Brood inside of Captain Marvel here, and then we have presumably just a connected story right here with X-Men. In fact, inside the X-Men it says Lord of the Brood Part 1. So both books right here are featuring very, very specific teams, very cool members teaming up to rescue someone that they love. Inside of the X-Men book here, we get a lot of our more classic X-Men's combined with some of the newer ones going over to help the Starjammers right now, because Kozar has actually been attacked by the Brood, and so they're going in there to do some kind of a rescue mission in here. And I will say the art's pretty interesting. It's always fun when we're attacking the Brood because nobody ever holds back on there, and we get some pretty cool like synergistic battles in here with just the different power sets between like fire and ice. So these kind of moments are really fun when they don't need to hold back and they can just unleash hell in here. And the Brood are an interesting race to battle anyway. So that was pretty cool. And we get some revelations about what's going on with Kozar in here. And we also get a little bit of an introduction and backstory with Forge as well, which is going to lead in some interesting places because Forge is always up to no good. And so here we are with Forge getting into some classic trouble there. So X-Men number 19 is pretty cool. And then Captain Marvel is pretty much the same. Issue number 46. We are in part 4 of their Brood run right now, Revenge of the Brood. And they have some teammates going together and they're trying to save Binary and Rogue at the same time. So the Brood have captured them, basically siphoning off their power for whatever means. And so we have our different strike teams getting together and trying to rescue everybody inside of here. This book is actually written by Kelly Thompson, and the art is very, very different. It has a different tone to it. It's very shiny. It's almost like everyone's wearing wet latex. And so, that's not exactly a bad thing, but at the same time, it's a little bit different and jarring than what we're used to seeing with like black heavy inking and things like that. So again, we're fighting the Brood. Everyone's kind of unleashing hell on these guys, and everyone seems to be falling into a trap, very similar to the X-Men run here. So if you're in the X-Men and you're especially into some Brood stuff, Captain Marvel is really great, and X-Men should be right up your alley too. All right, the next Marvel book we read was Nightcrawler's issue number 1. Again, this is in that Sins of Sinister universe, and this is actually pretty interesting. This is 10 years after the Sins of Sinister, and this is actually right along the same lines as that Storm Brotherhood of Mutants issue we got most recently, but we understand here that we have basically this Nightcrawler assassination squad that has been cultivated by Mr. Sinister over time, and we have Mother Righteous taking advantage of that and developing a way to kind of take control of those people to form her own little elite hit squad in here. Now, what's really cool about this book is seeing the combination of powers between everybody, because we essentially have our X-23 Nightcrawler, we have our Spider-Man Nightcrawler, we have our Domino Nightcrawler, we have all these cool characters, even Toad as a Nightcrawler. So it's like, you get a Bamf, and you get a Bamf, and you get a Bamf. So it's cool to see these guys going completely nuts inside this book and just being like this elite hit squad in a way, but they're also kind of stupid at the same time. And we see that play throughout the book through dialogue with Mother Righteous and stuff like that. But Mother Righteous has a big plan right now, and so she's trying to screw up Mr. Sinister's plans. She's well aware of like the Moira chambers that he has, and so she's trying to interfere there and gain access to that. So I would say if you're deep into this whole Sins of Sinister stuff, you've been following around with all the different clones of Mr. Sinister, and you're into this whole world and you're buying into the Sins of Sinister stuff, that's basically essential reading, I would say. So check this one out. Check out Storm, Brotherhood of Mutants as well. And then of course that Sins of Sinister one shot we got about a month ago at this point. All right, and so on to one of my favorite Marvel books of the week. We have Fantastic Four issue number 4. It took 4 issues to get the team back together, but they did it in dramatic fashion inside of here. Issue 1, 2, and 3 separated the team out a little bit, and they were on their own isolated journeys. So we had like Reed and Sue going off, and they had some kind of a weird town where everything was just off, and it was infested with Doombots and things like that. But it was a kind of touching story at the same time. We had Ben Grimm and his wife kind of hanging out, going into this one town where everything seems to be standing still as far as like the time zone or timeline that they're in. It felt like it was back in like the 60s or 70s, if I'm not mistaken. And then we had, of course, our Johnny Storm issue where he's getting a job and his boss is a complete jerk and he kind of takes it over with the help of the coworkers. In this issue here, we actually have the team getting back together because we had Sue, Johnny, and Reed finding out that there's this essentially gigantic dome in the middle of Kentucky that looks like the Thing. It looks like Ben Grimm with his like rocky, scaly exterior. When they investigate a little bit more, they realize that it was some kind of an alien parasitic thing that landed, attached itself to the closest organic tissue and like replicated it and made this dome to siphon the energy from this being. And so what I like about this issue too is we open it up with the Nihilist wave essentially attacking New York, and we get to see all of our heroes going completely nuts on these aliens, of course, like they always do. And so it was a really good moment to showcase their power sets, bring the team back together, heighten that interest, then separate us, bring us back into the modern time, and then we actually get to play out the story. And there's a lot of like heavy emotion to it and a lot of gravity to it as well. So I thought it was pretty cool how they handled the pacing in this issue and how they got the team and the family back together towards the end. So I will say the only downfall in this book is the ending of the book. Since I'm not a long-time Fantastic Four reader, I'm not exactly sure like the significance of the direction they're about to go in, and so I might have to do my research on that as well. But if you're a long-term fan of Fantastic Four, it might mean a little bit more to you. But if you've been barely hanging on for issue 1, 2, and 3, or if it was moderately interesting, I think issue number 4 is really going to spike it up, and it's probably the best issue so far in the series. Check it out. All right, we're going to jump into some indie books next, starting with Image Comics. We have I Hate Fairyland, issue number 4 from Scotty Young. And now there's been a lot of interesting covers for this book, but this is the one that I like right here as well. And so I might try to pick up those other ones just for their comedic point. But yeah, this is a pretty fun book. So Gert, this little girl we have on the cover here, she is no stranger to Fairyland. In fact, she was there, pretty much dominated the place, and got back home to the real world, but now she's diving back in because some big corporate monster asked her to go back to help rescue his son or something like that, but he's got ulterior motives, and we're going to explore that later on in this run, I would imagine. But she's now going back to Fairyland. She's got some help of some crazy characters as well, just so she stays on path and everything, but this chick is like demented and warped and just absolutely crazy, and so they have these little side missions all the time. The last issue was like this critters kind of a thing. She got this little pet from this land that they're in right now, and she did the wrong thing, and essentially it multiplied like a critter situation or a gremlin situation, and it completely ravaged the town. And so we have a very similar issue inside of here where she gets a lot of complaints that, maybe she's not the most hygienic person in the bar here. I think I've shown this page, but a lot of the patrons in the bar are absolutely like passing out because of how rank she is. And so the funny situation here is basically they tell her to go take a bath, and she attempts to, but then she actually gets swallowed up by this gigantic demon monster, this gigantic like mutated whale in that lake. And so then she has to battle her way out of here. I'm telling you, the art in here is absolutely nuts. It's incredible. Is there like a story? Kind of, but not really at the same time. This book is all about the absurdity. It's all about the art style. It's all about like the grotesqueness. So I'd say if you're like into like a Ren and Stimpy kind of a vibe, you want like an action adventure hero's journey with like a Ren and Stimpy flair to it, this book is for you. If you're not interested in that, you want more detailed story and more meaning and everything like that, like a Kanto kind of an action adventure, this book isn't for you. But with that said, I'm absolutely loving this book right here. It's a great little palette cleanser between some heavy material. It's just funny. I'm having a blast with it. Check it out. All right, we're blessed with 2 Mark Millar books this week. We have issue number 3 of Night Club, and we have Ramirez on the art here as well. And I cannot believe that this book is only $2.99, guys. This book is incredible, both from a writing perspective and art perspective. So definitely check this one out. Support a creator that's putting a book out at $2. That's absolutely incredible right there. So we think Spawn's doing really good. Check this one out. It's absolutely incredible. But since we're on issue number 3, if you're not reading issue number 1 and 2, basically this is a vampire-centric book. So if you're into that kind of thing, check this out. It is an origin story with some teenagers and things like that, but it doesn't have that same vibe and feel that like a Spider-Man origin story would have, like a Miles origin story where, okay, I got these powers, but like, how do I be great? How do I balance this between work and school and family and my friends and things like that? And it doesn't have that like depressing vibe to it. These kids absolutely embrace the power. They're like, forget school, man. We hated it anyways. My home sucks. I'm leaving there too. We're going to go out and we're going to develop these powers, and we're going to just go kick some ass and beat some bad people up in the area. And that's exactly what you get in here. So I do appreciate that like little twist to the typical teenager origin story when they develop powers. The art in here is absolutely incredible as well. So that's another great aspect of this book. And it has that monstrous element, but it also has this like social vibe that they really, really nail. They really get the sense of like being at some kind of like a high school party if you're not exactly a popular person and you're just kind of hanging out and having to deal with it. But you also have this like weird confidence because you have these superpowers that you just can't tell anybody. So they do a really good job of balancing that, I would say. And then all of a sudden, when the guys need to get out and stretch their legs a little bit and actually kind of feel like a badass again, they can accomplish that as well. So this book is really fun. It's building in an interesting way, just because the person that actually turned these kids into vampires, he's building this army, and we really don't know too much about that yet. But towards the end, we actually see another person, another older guy, who's kind of like this biker dude with his little gang, and they're vampires as well, coming into town, and he gets wind that there's these kids out here with powers, and apparently he's not too happy about that, so he's going to be attacking them. He's probably going to be the antagonist of the guy that turned the kids, and so it's going to be kind of fun to see how that all plays out. So I'm excited to see where this book goes. $2, amazing story, amazing art. This has to be in your pull list. But continuing the Mark Millar train, we have Nemesis Reloaded with Jorge Remendez, and you all know Remendez. He actually has some of the best art out there right now. So Nemesis Reloaded, I believe it's a volume 2. In this issue here, we're exploring the ramifications of the kill order, or the actions of our Nemesis character inside of issue 1. He basically took out all the head gang members or the mob bosses and things like that. And he also put a hit on every cop in the city. So all hell is breaking loose, and all these police officers are being murdered in the street. And all these different gangs are kind of like in disarray right now because all their bosses are gone. So it's all this new blood coming to power, looking to redeem themselves, right? To make a mark really quick. And so we have all these other cops and detectives trying to figure out what the heck's going on. Who is this main Nemesis character? And in great storytelling fashion, we ask the question up front, and then we get the majority of the rest of the issue explaining the origin of this little boy and what his motivation is and how he was trained, a little bit of his backstory, where he came from, things like that. And then we flash forward to our more present day, where he's actually going over the next phase of his plan, trying to assassinate this specific person from his childhood. So again, another high action issue right here. I'm loving this book so much. It's gory, it's gruesome, it's got like this weird funny element to it too somehow. This is a really great read. Check it out. All right, sticking with Image, we have 8 Billion Genies, issue number 7 from Charles Scholl and Ryan Brown. And you know what? I'm really surprised and not surprised about how in-depth and how much detail and like storytelling is inside this whole thing. Now, when we first started reading this, we were understanding the fact that like, okay, everybody's got a genie and all hell breaks loose pretty quickly. And we meet these people inside of the bar and we're pretty connected with them. We spend a lot of time with them. But what I didn't think about was inside of those books, we understood that we're going to be exploring different time frames in this new universe where genies exist. So for instance, I think it was like the first 8 seconds and then the first 8 minutes and the first 8 months and then the first 8 years or whatever it is. This book here explores the first 8 decades. And so when you think about that, and you think about the characters that we met inside of issue 1 and we followed through in the next few issues, most of those people are going to be dead by the end of this book, just because it's been 80 years since then. And so with that, I didn't even think about that concept. So it's a really fun exploration about what the world looks like immediately, and we get connected to these people, but then we see them grow, we see them get into old age, we see how they move around and interact with other people, how they use their wishes or don't use their wishes, and then we go beyond them. And now it's more about the story of the world and the genies rather than the people that we were introduced to in issue number 1. And that theme is going to continue because the next issue is going to explore the first 8 centuries. So we're going to get a real far look into the future and see what the world looks like inside of here. Again, Ryan Brown is absolutely killing it on the art, and Charles Soule is doing a really good job of just developing the story way beyond where we started. And it's been a hell of a ride. I absolutely love this book. And I can't wait for issue number 8. Make sure to check this out in the trade if you're not reading the single issues. Now, I'm so glad we have this book in existence because it was kind of out of nowhere. We have Art Brut issue number 3, or as some of the long-term fans call it, Electric Sublime. This actually was released as a trade paperback back a couple of years ago, and so now we get the single issue treatment on here with a little bit of changes to some of the art in here and some of the lettering, I believe, and the covers, of course, on here. And we're actually blessed with a little short story, a little backstory at the end as well. So I'm loving this right here. Of course, we had W. Maxwell Prince, we have Marazzo, Lopes, and O'Halloran inside of here. And this is just another crazy, zany story, basically. We have this guy, Art Brut, who's very connected to art in general. He has a way of going through the painting and actually interacting with the subjects inside of the painting. And so, like, for instance, we can go inside the Mona Lisa and have a conversation with her, or we can go inside Starry Night in theory, and then we can kind of see the countryside and see that landscape. It would be pretty cool. On the flip side, we have this villain that we've been introduced to slowly over time, who we really get an introduction to inside of this issue, who's developed his own way of going back in there and going into these paintings and actually destroying this art, because he kind of values this like clean slate world versus the world that other people value as being beautiful. And so we have this cool dichotomy right here between Art Brut and our Andy Warhol character that's inside of here. Of course, we're kind of going through this whole story through the eyes of this detective who is battling her own personal issues at work and a relationship at home. And so we're kind of going through the eyes of that character, understanding the powers and what's actually going on in here. And it's absolutely insane. And so I love this book. W. Maxwell Prince is on here, so you know you're going to get that raw human emotion and experience, perfectly telling it inside of a comic book. And so this book is absolutely brilliant. I would pick it up for sure. All right, we're out of Image. We're going to go into Boom Studios next, starting off with Mosley. We have issue number 2. And the first issue of this kind of reminded me of God Country in a way. We basically have this kind of broken family, and we have the elder of that family assuming some kind of a big power, and he's actually taking on the man towards the end of this. And so this is a continuation of that story. We have our superpowered Mosley character right here, kind of taking revenge on the technology side of the society, which is essentially taken over. People have allowed electronics to be implanted. They're like half cyborg at this point, or at least modified. And he is just completely upset and done with that whole thing. And he's taken it right to the source. So basically, this is our big boss battle that we see inside of issue number 2. But as us gamers know that, behind one boss, there's always a dozen more. And so he may have won the day, but the battle is far from over. So we have people actually going against him at the end because he thought he was like a liberator in some degree, but actually people have grown reliant on this technology and the integration of it. They're actually quite upset with him and the fact that he's trying to take down the man in a way. And so our hero escapes right here and actually allies with somebody that we did not see coming, based on what we learned so far in issue number 1 and number 2. So this one's actually really interesting. It's a fun book for sure. It's a little action adventure book. Guy gets a lot of powers and attacks the system. And has a lot of good motivation and personal motivation, especially to do so. So Mosley issue number 2, it's not a bad read. I'd highly recommend this one too. And the last book we have this week is from AWA. We have Trojan issue number 2. I got this one at the recommendation of so many people. A bunch of people sent me a message and said, dude, you got to check out Trojan. Because they know what I'm kind of into. They know I like AWA books. This has like a fantasy element mixed with a little Red Room twist. And so I thought that was going to be a pretty cool combination. So I read issue number 1 online, grabbed number 2, and I'm going to be completing this 4-issue run at some point. But to get you kind of caught up on here, society's pretty much gone to hell. We've been divided politically, economically, culturally. And so people are looking in different places to take out their anger and their frustration because they don't have their family and friends to do that to anymore. So a lot of these like little Red Room scenes spin up. This is also a world where we have mythological creatures. So we have like, what do they say in here? We have gnomes and we have centaurs and fauns and gorgons and all these different creatures of myth. They kind of go over all the different creatures they might have inside of here, giants and things like that. And so these Red Rooms, so some of them are dedicated to the mutilation of these mythological creatures. And so some of them bring a higher price, some of them bring more donations and things like that. And so they're always looking for the next most rare mythological creature. And of course, we have our fairy on the cover, who happens to be one of the most rare creatures out there. But as we learn in issue number 1, she actually elicits the help of this real sick dude who's kind of connected to the underground. And he helps her get into the Red Room for her own reasons that we explore, especially inside of this book here. So what's really fun is not only the premise alone, but the relationship between this fairy girl and this guy who's connected to the underground. He's got his own demons that he's battling. And of course, she has her ultimate end as well. And so the two of them make a very interesting combination in the story, which I think adds a lot of depth and meaning to this whole thing. But in classic 4-issue fashion, we do get a little bit of an expedited ending to this book. I would like to see this part drawn out a little bit more. I feel like at the end of this 4-issue run, I'm going to wish it was 6 issues and they would kind of lean in and kind of let it breathe and reveal some of the things a little bit slower, because this issue had a great pace for the first 2/3. I think the last third of it was sped up a little bit just because we only have 4 issues in this run. But with that said, The dialogue, the relationships, the meaning behind everything, and the message in this book are really, really great. And I really recommend this book as well if you're into that kind of stuff. So Trojan, a recommendation from you guys. Thank you so much for that. I'm having a blast with this one. But guys, with that said, that's everything I read this week. So thank you very much for watching. If you're new to the channel, go down below and consider hitting that subscribe button. I would really appreciate it. Also, please hit that like button as well and check out the join button. It's brand new. I have a tier for everybody, so check out the details down below. But as always, happy reading, and I'll see you guys down below in the comments.